Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Abel Tadala, Director of Financial Inclusion Digital Financial Services with FSD Ethiopia. I'm really excited to have and to be part of this webinar on e-commerce um, uh, based on research done by the GSMA Central Insights Unit. Given the importance of e-commerce for the overall benefit it can bring to our economy, it has already been recognized as one of the key pillars in the Digital Ethiopia 2025 strategy as well. So the opportunity it presents, as particularly our MSMEs, has been recognized there. Hence, having this discussion today is a realization of that immense opportunity. The GSMA Central Insight Unit has conducted a research across 6 African countries to see the state of e-commerce, to see the potential and challenge. And today, in this webinar, we'll be shortly looking at the presentation and have an interesting panel discussion with colleagues in the ecosystem. For FSD Ethiopia, this actually is an exciting thing to participate in, as we are very much eager to see the Ethiopian community population benefiting from what the digital world is offering, realizing, benefiting from the opportunities of the digital world. Particularly for MSMEs, this presents a better access in terms of their ability to access new markets, which they wouldn't otherwise have an opportunity to. It also presents an opportunity for efficiency, improving the way they do businesses, reduce costs, and then reach new markets they previously have not been able to. So in terms of our alignment to our strategy, we are very much eager to see a financial ecosystem that gives opportunity, that creates an opportunity for an economic growth for individuals, households, and businesses, and hence our participation in this webinar. Without taking much time, I'll introduce Lauren White to present the research briefly, and then we'll come back and have an interesting panel discussion. Stay with us and keep your notes so we can have a Q&A session at the end. Thank you. Lauren, please take it up.
Thank you, Abel, for that introduction. So hi, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Lauren White, and I'm an Insights Analyst at the GSMA. For those of you who do not know us, we are an industry organization advocating for the mobile and wider communications industry, and we have approximately 1,000 members globally. So I work for the foundation arm of the GSMA, Mobile for Development, which works in partnership with development agencies and donors in technology for sustainable development. Some of our partners include the UK Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, the GIZ, and then more recently, USAID as well. So we research and invest in innovation for sustainable and socio-economic development, primarily in low and middle income countries. So whilst our work is wide-ranging, we focus on 4 key themes. So these are digital inclusion, climate change, digital financial inclusion, and humanitarian response. So on to today's webinar. I'll be sharing some interesting recent research with you on the status of e-commerce in Ethiopia and other African markets. So conducted in partnership with the UK Department for Business and Trade, our e-commerce research is based on survey data of just over 250 MSMEs in 6 different markets. So these were Egypt, Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. The overall objective of the research was to find out from micro, small, and medium businesses in these markets their experience of using e-commerce, what their pain points were, and what the barriers were. So we did this in order to help scale the adoption of e-commerce and build their resilience and profitability. The agenda for today's session is as on the slide. So I will deliver my presentation now for about 10 minutes, and then I'll introduce our panel of experts on the ground who are building, scaling, and supporting e-commerce in Ethiopia. I just want to mention here that if you do have any questions, please just pop them in the comments and we will come to them at the end after the panel discussion. So on to Ethiopia. So our sample in Ethiopia was 275 MSMEs already using e-commerce. 232 of these, a significant majority, were micro enterprises, which does reflect the wider economy in Ethiopia. You can also see here the sector breakdown of the MSMEs that we surveyed. And as you can see, consumer electronics and fashion and apparel were the most common sectors, although there were also other sectors included in the sample. So, two key baseline findings that we had. 94% of MSMEs in Ethiopia reported that they had experienced increased sales from e-commerce. 78% also then said that they had experienced a decrease in the cost of running their businesses after adopting e-commerce. However, only 1.4% of the total retailers in Ethiopia were online for the years 2020 to 2021. So this shows a gap between, on the one hand, we have MSMEs saying how significantly e-commerce has benefited them, and then on the other, we see these low uptake rates. Before we delve a bit deeper into the enablers of e-commerce in Ethiopia, let's first have a think about what type of e-commerce MSMEs are using. You can see here that Ethiopia reflects the wider trend, with more than 3/4 of MSMEs exclusively using social media, but with a much stronger preference for this e-commerce channel than in some of the other markets. And only 3% of MSMEs engaging, and there was only 3% of MSMEs which engaged in all three e-commerce channels, which included own websites and e-commerce marketplaces. I'd like to pivot here for a second to have a look at digital skills in Ethiopia. So, according to the World Economic Forum's most recent global competitiveness report, Ethiopia ranks 100th out of the 141 included countries on the digital skills among the active population metric, which is based on survey data from the World Economic Forum's Executive Opinion Survey. This comes behind some of our other markets, such as Egypt and Kenya, with rankings of 44 and 49, which we see have higher rates of all e-commerce channel use. So then how does this link? What you can see here on the slide is the percentage of MSMEs in Ethiopia, which said that they needed each of these points to grow their e-commerce business. Using social media, own websites, and e-commerce marketplaces all require a certain level of digital skills in order to effectively use them. E-commerce marketplaces and own websites tend to be a little bit more complex and require a certain level of digital skills in order to use them that tend to be more advanced. We will delve a bit deeper into the impact that digital skills have on e-commerce scaling later in the panel. So back to social media use for e-commerce in Ethiopia. So Telegram is the most popular social commerce application, with 95% of those using social media using this platform. Potential reasons for this include that Telegram has fewer data requirements than other social media platforms, which means that it is a more affordable option for MSMEs. Telegram also enables better encryption and auto-deletion of messages, which provides better security for MSMEs and their customers, particularly when sharing personal data, perhaps on payment on delivery, on payments, or on delivery and sharing address details. Now moving on to the two fundamental enablers of e-commerce that we looked at. So these were connectivity and cost of smartphones. So we took connectivity performance scores from the GSMA Mobile Connectivity Index, which has a wide range of measures which are collated into one overall score. These include infrastructure, affordability, consumer readiness, and content and services. As you can see on the slide, Ethiopia is just above mid-range when compared to the other markets that we looked at. So we also then looked at the cost of smartphones as a percentage of average monthly income, where you can see that Ethiopia scored highest, meaning that smartphones were most expensive, costing over 75% of the average monthly income. This is definitely a concern and a key pain point for MSMEs, as the majority of e-commerce is conducted on a smartphone. Reflective of this, slow or unreliable internet connection and the cost of hardware or devices were the top 2 reported barriers to selling online for MSMEs in Ethiopia. At the other end of the spectrum, we have South Africa, where smartphones cost just 8% of the average monthly income. Our research then went on to explore the building blocks of e-commerce, which include regulations, digital payments, and delivery and logistics. For the next section of the presentation, I will go through key findings for each of these enablers. So first, looking at e-commerce policy and regulations. What you can see here on the slide is the key elements that impact the adoption of e-commerce. Shaded in a lighter red, you can see that Ethiopia still has some fragmented laws which can make it difficult for MSMEs to operate efficiently. One step which Ethiopia has made under the Digital Ethiopia 2025 plan, which has put Ethiopia ahead of other markets in terms of creating an enabling environment, is the introduction of an e-trade business license. Prior to this, in e-commerce businesses were required to get multiple licenses. So this could include a license for operation as a technology company, a warehousing license, licenses related to driving, amongst others. So this was inefficient and meant that enterprises were applying for licenses which didn't necessarily reflect their needs or business operations. The e-trade license allows MSMEs to register for a specific e-commerce license, simplifying trade. This is a significant step towards creating a more enabling environment for MSMEs to engaging with e-commerce. But finalizing the process of application and making MSMEs aware of this license would be the next step towards progression. We are fortunate to be having with us today the Ministry of Innovation and Technology, which is heading the Digital Ethiopia plan. You can look forward to hearing from them about the regulatory initiatives which are being put forward to further improve the landscape. Moving on to payments. So we asked MSMEs what their preference was for the type of payments they like to receive for e-commerce. Ethiopia is highlighted in grey on this chart. So what we found was that cash on delivery was the most preferable payment type, and this was closely followed by Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was the only market where no MSMEs reported to prefer taking credit or debit cards. These findings reflect the current financial landscape, as whilst Ethiopia first trialled mobile wallets almost a decade ago in 2015, uptake remained low under this bank-led model. Regulatory reform in 2020 allowed non-bank organizations to offer mobile money services. Ethiotel has rapidly scaled subscription, and the government has also given real impetus to driving mobile money markets. In 2022, Safaricom entered the market as the second and only private telecom service provider and is expected to continually drive the uptake of mobile money in Ethiopia. Therefore, the popularity of mobile money payments may be partially explained by these developments in an otherwise nascent e-commerce landscape. Now looking at delivery and logistics. So MSMEs in Ethiopia are opting to either deliver to the buyer's location or have buyers pick up goods from their stores. Only 13% of MSMEs are using distribution points to get goods to buyers. So as Ethiopia faces significant delivery barriers, such as low rates of vehicle ownership and is an 80% rural population, where address systems tend to be a bit less developed and road infrastructure is poorer, it seems as though distribution points are an untapped solution to delivery. However, distribution points have the potential to reduce the cost of shipping and delivery for MSMEs and speed up the delivery to customers. So they are a viable option to serve the predominantly rural population in Ethiopia while mitigating some of the challenges that MSMEs are currently facing, such as high delivery costs and slow delivery. I'd like to end by looking at what MSMEs said they needed to scale their e-commerce businesses. So the top two needs that MSMEs in Ethiopia expressed for business growth were lower costs of internet and mobile data, as well as the needs for loans and credit. And actually, when looking at the overall statistics across all 6 of the markets that we surveyed, 40% highlighted capital as a key need to scale their e-commerce businesses. This shows that alongside development needed in each of the enablers, as well as training, investment is a clear area of needed focus to bolster the development of e-commerce in Ethiopia. So that was a fairly quick overview of some of our key findings for MSMEs in Ethiopia, and we'll set the scene for our panel discussion, which will start in just a second. So thank you very much. And just before I introduce the panelists, I would also like to thank our partners which supported this research. So this is the UK Foreign Commonwealth Development Office and the UK Department for Business and Trade. Moving on then to the panel discussion. Abul Tadele and my colleague Nigam Shahid will be co-moderating the panel. So as a quick introduction, Abul is the Financial Inclusion Pillar Lead at FSD Ethiopia, which aims to support the development of accessible, inclusive, and sustainable financial markets for economic growth. And Nigam is the Senior Insights Manager in the Central Insights team at the GSMA and was also the lead researcher on this project. We have an exciting lineup of panelists joining us. So firstly, we have Dr. Abiyo, who is the advisor to the Minister at the Ministry of Innovation and Technology. We also have Izana Raswork, founder and managing director of Africa 118, a GSMA Innovation Fund grantee. So if you don't know about the Innovation Fund, it was first launched in 2016 and has so far supported 144 grantees to accelerate their mobile technology solutions to tackle a number of global challenges. You can find out more on our website. We also have with us Munir Duri, CEO of Kafia, which started as a payment services company but has evolved into a digital platforms and infrastructure solution provider, which aims to ensure that every enterprise, farmer, and community member thrives through accessible and innovative financial services and technology. And last but not least, we have Tigabu Haile, founder and CEO of Ishi Express, Ethiopia's premier last-mile delivery company, which caters to both corporations and e-commerce enterprises. Tigabu was the former president of the Ethiopian Courier Association and has been a key player in the logistics landscape in Ethiopia. Before handing over to Abul, I'll leave this QR code up here for you, where you will find a link to our full report. The report is also available on the website. So thank you very much to FSD Ethiopia and all of our panelists, and I am looking forward to what I'm sure will be a very insightful discussion. A reminder to please do put any questions that you have in the comments, and we will answer them in the last portion of our webinar. Abul, over to you.
Thank you, Lauren. That was an excellent presentation and a good summary of the findings. I also have Nigam here with me, so I will allow Nigam to go first with those questions, and then I'll come back at some.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Lauren. Thank you very much to our panelists for joining us, and looking forward to kicking this discussion off. I think it would be great to bring in Munir from Kafia Technologies. I think, Munir, you come from a broad experience with both really kind of the payment space as well as an e-commerce, a marketplace background. I think as a starting question, I would like to ask you, what has been your experience of running an e-commerce platform in terms of both the opportunities and challenges?
Thank you, Nigam. A pleasure and to be on this interesting panel as part of it. Aligned to your findings that was presented earlier on, if you look at the opportunities, it's really about two fundamental areas, right? For MSMEs, the biggest opportunity is reducing the cost of retailing their products, and that has been reflected well on your side. And the second thing is really broadening accessing markets. So my experience is that from an interest perspective, it is quite overwhelming. So every MSME wants to have a secondary and tertiary channel, and e-commerce being one. The second advantage, again, like most parts of Africa, is that for the consumer, what we have experienced is it's an avenue of convenience. So whether they are accessing products from MSMEs or whether they are accessing products from white label goods, electronics, or appliances. So our experience, or my experience, is really from an opportunity perspective, it is quite extensive and large. Ethiopia has something like close to, I think, 3 to 4 million formal MSMEs, and this is not counting the informal sector of MSMEs, or micro at least. So it's quite a big market. And if you look at it from a flip side, from the consumer side, we have close to 22 or 25 million people that have smartphones that are currently on Ethio Telecom, and close to 1.8 to 2 million that is on the Safaricom network. So the market size is quite interesting. But saying that, however, then why is e-commerce not picking up? And again, most of what has been presented aligns to what on the ground I have experienced. But if you look at the one thing that drove the use of Telegram extensively is not only the convenience of downloading Telegram, because it requires small bandwidth, but really the biggest driver is that there's no taxation on it. So the fact that there's no taxation on it allows and pulls in a significant amount of MSMEs to sell on Telegram. That's the first major challenge. And that's why, if you see, we have been very successful in training a lot of MSMEs transition to digital skills. But what they have opted out for is selling their product on Telegram as opposed to on our platform. So again, consistent with your studies, you see that you have 17%, which is growing, by the way, of digital skills or literacy. But at the same time, 95% of the volume of sales happens through the social media network. That's the first challenge, is really the ability for MSMEs to earn more because they pay less tax. So that's the first learning. The second learning is, if you see, is from the consumer side, what value do you bring as an e-commerce site? Telegram and our website has no differentiation because the delivery is done manually. The payment is cash on delivery. So the consumer does not have a very different experience by coming to our website or our e-commerce platform. It is better it's equivalent to see more vendors on Telegram, and the convenience level is very similar. So that's the second challenge, is that the advent of Telebir, I think, will change significantly what's happening, because now e-commerce platforms can offer ways to pay or means to pay that is beyond cash on delivery. So that option should be given. The second thing is the trust factor. So if you look at what we offer to MSMEs on the Telegram channel, this MSME comes to your door. Probably he or she is the owner of the product, and you check it and you accept it or pay for it. In our case, the return cannot be immediate because it's an institutional e-commerce. A person cannot look at it and say, take it back. But on Telegram, the consumer has the convenience of accepting or rejecting the product. So that's another layer from a convenience challenge that we see. The third channel that we see is that the distribution, again captured by your findings, is logistics, and I think Tagab will cover it more in depth than I do. But at the moment, logistics cost is very high, and scarcity is also like, for us to deliver within a day, it will have to be a very high cost of logistics. So on the opportunity side, I think we see it a very significant potential, but the challenges around logistics, payments, taxation, convenience need to be addressed should any e-commerce company harvest the potential.
Thank you so much, Mary. That was a really sort of comprehensive analysis of the challenge of e-commerce marketplace versus social media. Why would an MSME make X or Y choice, and what makes it challenging for an e-commerce platform to sort of compete with something like Telegram? I'd love to come back to some more questions around this later. I would like to ask one more question from you, and then maybe Abel can go on to discuss some of these things, unpack them with Tagabu. So the second is on regulation. So I know Lauren mentioned that, you know, we had some conversations with MSMEs who think that having a dedicated e-commerce business license under which they can register is great. And as far as I understand, it's still in process how to register using it. But with some of the other laws that seem to be critical to advancing e-commerce and building consumer trust as well as MSME trust, such as data privacy protection, cybersecurity. We know Ethiopia has laws, but they are fragmented. I wondered what your opinion on the regulatory environment was and where you would advocate for change, if you would.
So if you look at a proclamation level, I think we have a very extensive and all-encompassing law. The challenge now comes down to the directives that allows e-commerce providers to register. So it's not only the MSME on one side, it's even the e-commerce providers cannot have a license at the moment. So if you look at what we do, is we have, I think, 6 or 7 or 8 licenses to make sure that we have fulfillment of the regulatory requirements. So I think that is in the final stages of solving. But when you look at regulation, it's not only the licensing part. I think from a policy perspective, trust is another factor. So the government has the onus of ensuring, whether it is through awareness campaigns or other means, to ensure that e-commerce is another channel of retail. And a trust has to be established. And that is really a policy requirement. So how does a consumer relate to a new form of retail, a new form of channel for buying things? Can I trust it? Can I not trust it? So a large level of awareness is required. And then when it comes to again, I cannot stress more, from a regulatory perspective, the issue of tax needs to be addressed. Because we are talking about not small 5%, 10%, we are talking about a significant amount of 35% saving on any product. So you can see it as 35% more earning to the MSME. So why would they choose a formal channel? So that is a policy and a regulatory matter to be addressed. The third thing is, again, from a regulatory perspective, is really enabling this logistics distribution network to flourish. So these are the 4 key areas of where I see regulations. Data protection, I wish Dr. Abiot was here. It's also in the final stages of being published. So we have that. In terms of consumer protection, we have 2 interesting laws in the country. One is inside the proclamation. It has a consumer protection clauses, significant clauses that protect the consumer, but it has not been communicated, or awareness is very little that stops the consumer from coming to e-commerce. The second consumer protection is we have a very interesting consumer protection agency that has clear laws about exchange of goods and what responsibility the seller has on the exchange of goods. The third law is the central bank has consumer protection around the payment part of it, and that's also clear. The challenge of this consumer protection, they are not well publicized, educated, and exposed to both the MSME side and the consumer side.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying that for us. And Abel, can I hand over to you and maybe bring in Tigabu, if that works?
Yeah, thank you, Nigam. Actually, this takes us to Gabu, who is also engaged in the logistics business. Munir earlier was touching on the challenge of logistics. Maybe Gabu, I know you are engaged in the logistics business. Maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about what Ishi Express does, and then maybe explain to us what those challenges are, and if you actually agree with Munir's take on the challenge of logistics.
Thank you, Abel, and thank you, everyone. My name is Tigabu, and I'm founder of Ishi Express. We are a last mile delivery company. We have been operating for the last 6 years. We mostly service corporates like banks, telecom companies, manufacturers like Techno, Samsung, and other companies. But we definitely believe that business will go down, and the next big thing is e-commerce. And we service promising e-commerce companies in Ethiopia like Tomoka. We also work with Munir's Shaga and other startups that are working in the e-commerce sector. It's definitely promising, but there are a lot of challenges, especially logistics-wise. First is supply side. So basically, in total in Ethiopia, there's the ratio of one vehicle to 100 people, which means there's not enough vehicle to do actually robust logistics. And also the government doesn't really, even if we want to grow that supply side, the government doesn't even allow individuals to own motorbikes, even electric bikes in Addis for the last 4 years. So you can't even have new entrants. That being a challenge, then there's definitely a constant ban of motorbikes in town and some routes of the city, being also a challenge. The other challenge is addressing challenges. One of the things that makes last mile delivery quite expensive is since we don't have proper address, you have to make a lot of calls to just do one delivery. Makes it expensive from communication side and takes more time than thought. Also comes to the cost. Also talent-wise, also another challenge since only few universities started giving courses on supply chain and logistics. So talent being challenged, and there are all the challenge, but definitely it's promising and e-commerce. I see it not as it's seen as a fashion or a service that needs for a developed economy, but e-commerce is something that we need for a developing economy, because as Munir said, first, it cuts the barrier of geography. So if it's a shop, they are limited into the traffic of people walking to their shop. But with e-commerce, they can sell to anyone in Ethiopia, even in Africa and to the world as well. So then also from buyer side, they're not limited to whoever they can access geographically. They can buy anything from anyone. So, but with solving that, I think there is a huge potential for Ethiopia to capture the market and advance the digitalization of the country.
Thank you, Tigabu, for that summary. Maybe could you go a bit deep in terms of what sort of business models you use to work with e-commerce companies like you mentioned earlier, or do you also engage directly with the merchant yourselves?
Thank you, Abel. we see ourselves as a purely logistics company, so we don't onboard merchants. We service e-commerce companies as marketplaces that onboard merchants and sell online. Our business model is basically we plug in our logistics system into their day-to-day operations through our different types of services and different types of vehicles right now.
Interesting. So you mentioned a lot of challenge around maybe the shortage of vehicles, maybe the lack of opportunities to also expand the capacity in terms of the supply side. Other addressing mechanisms also as other challenge you mentioned. So how do you see the overall logistics ecosystem and sector complementing and supporting the growth of e-commerce, and then how can it be expanded?
Definitely, logistics is a key factor for to build a very sustainable and robust e-commerce sector in the country. And one thing that can help them is right now, even in most practices in e-commerce companies, they try to do logistics also in-house, which makes it expensive for them. It's a huge distraction. There's no way they can outsmart a professional logistics company. But like if you sit,
Sorry, I think Tagabo is frozen. Let's skip it.
Looks like it.
And Dr. Abio has just joined us. Welcome, Dr. Abio, to the discussion.
Okay.
I think
thank you very much. Sorry for joining you late.
That's all right. Welcome. It's glad to have you here. And I think maybe a transition then to discussing with you some of the e-commerce challenges, because we've just lost Tagabo, who hopefully can join us with, I think, connectivity issues. I can hand over maybe to Abu, or actually, well, I can kick off with the first question to you, which really is on the regulations and what is being done on the regulatory side to make e-commerce more enabling for MSMEs. Sorry, Tagabo, welcome back. We've navigated away from you, but we will come back to you.
Okay.
It would be great to hear what the ministry is doing on the regulations front. I know there's some progress being made and some draft proclamations, etc. So, yeah, over to you on that question. Oh, I think we might have a connectivity challenge.
Yeah. Okay. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And sorry, joining late. I'm in the middle of another meeting. Just let me explain what has been done from the regulatory side. As you may all know, that the Ethiopian government has enacted the digital transformation strategy, and this strategy has identified the major areas of intervention by the government. And one of the areas that is selected as one of the major areas selected was e-commerce, because e-commerce has a unique potential for Ethiopia. Because it's not only because e-commerce is good or something that is working other parts of the world, but there are unique opportunities for Ethiopia. For instance, Ethiopia is a large country and the population is scattered, and the trade activities are also very fragmented, inefficient, and there is also big barriers to join trade, and also it's not easy for women and economically disadvantaged group to start a business. So we believe that e-commerce has so many advantages for Ethiopians. So the strategy has identified e-commerce as one of the areas that the government should focus on. So one of the major intervention is the development of the e-transaction proclamation. And this proclamation is the one that legalized e-commerce in Ethiopia. Before this proclamation, it was not possible to legalize all electronic transaction. Usually the burden of proof is usually on the consumers, but now the legal system recognize e-transaction as well as e-commerce. Following that one, the government has took also a measure to make e-commerce as one of the areas in the trade classification. Before this, it was not possible to have licenses with the name of e-commerce, but now it's possible to have e-commerce as a trade category. And after that, the other major intervention was to include e-commerce as one of the investment areas that deserves incentive from the government side. So it's clearly included in the national investment incentive proclamation. So these are the major regulatory intervention. So to support this regulatory intervention and to make also to conduct other types of research types of activities, the government also commissioned pilot implementation of projects with various partners, especially the venture meta partnership with iScientist and MasterCard Foundation is one of them. It is a project, a 5-year project to produce 100 e-commerce companies and to create 50,000 jobs in the area of e-commerce. So it's going well. Now the project already has started to produce new businesses in agriculture, in creative art, education, and other services. So side to these activities, we are also studying the areas that needs policy intervention. And also we are also working with other partners, especially in identifying the major roadblocks in e-commerce and also converting these things into a sort of regulatory intervention. So far, I think it seems things are going well from the regulation side, but the major challenge is that so far the intervention is from the supply side. That is, we are supporting companies to establish e-commerce companies. We are also having these regulations, and also we incentivize many of them. But all this intervention is mainly from the supply side. So, but there is still, we need to work from the demand side. For example, how to link markets to each other. Even though the company is there, the system is there, unless there are demands that actually consume the system, the e-commerce will not go nowhere. So this is one of the challenge. The other one is the Ethiopian e-commerce landscape is highly dominated by the social media types of e-commerces. So even if it has so many advantages, because from the ease of use perspective, and also from ease of access and also having established consumer side or user side, but social media based e-commerce companies has their own problems. Especially, it's difficult to scale and also to have their own brands and even to strengthen the ecosystem, it has its own type of problem. So we need to solve this one, and also we need to also have a clear mechanism to address conflicts and also consumer grievances. Even though the e-commerce is at very low stage, there are a lot of grievances here and there related to e-commerce, and also the parallel market is also increasing rapidly. We expect e-commerce to formalize trade and to contribute to the national economy, but there are trends that now the e-commerce is going more and more to the informal channel and creating another areas of concern. So now we are working on this through awareness raising as well as creating mechanisms just to encourage people to go more to the formal side. these are the major activities so far done from the government side. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abia. You've touched on some important elements of this that Munir was discussing with us as well. This sort of challenge of having social media as obviously a valuable way to sell, but then trying to consider what is the value proposition for MSMEs to switch to other channels like e-commerce platforms or their own websites that may potentially bring more value add, but there is less ease of use. Before we ask the next question, I wanted to check, are you able to be with us for the next half an hour, or do you have limited time? Because I did want to bring in Izana, who is
sorry, I have to leave. I'm in the middle of another meeting. Thank you for your understanding.
Okay, do you have 10 minutes? Then we will ask questions to you first. Are you able to give us another 10 minutes?
I have to join, but if there is a question right now, I can answer.
Okay, in that case, I'll hand over to Abel to get one question in.
Yeah, actually, Dr. Abiot has touched on a lot of points across the various points you wanted to raise. Just maybe to add on, to give him a chance to add on what he previously said in terms of addressing the challenge. So earlier, before you joined us, actually, Tagabo as well as Muni was mentioning some of the challenges you also retouched, like, for example, logistic challenges in the e-commerce sector. Tagabo was mentioning the lack of supply side capacity growth in terms of being able to grow vehicles, being able to grow the number of motorbikes, electric or otherwise, and so on. So what is the ministry doing in this regard? Is there anything that you are looking at from this perspective?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, actually, this logistic problem is there before the coming of the e-commerce itself. So it's an ongoing challenge, actually. But the problem is, even within these challenges, sometimes there are man-made challenges that's created regularly with logistic sector and to the government. Actually, one of the problem is the coordination among institutions between Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Innovation, Ministry of Trade, and also the Addis Ababa transport bureaus. There are a lot of lack of coordination. So recently now we are working together. We have established a team who was looking inside this problem. Actually, previously also, we have tried to coordinate this issue, like licensing motorbikes differently. Sorry, because of various reasons. So far, recently, now we are renegotiating, and also we are discussing with, especially with Addis Ababa Transport Bureau. They appreciate the problem. They know, they understand the impacts, but the problem is they have to obey the direction from the security side. So these are the challenges so far. Hopefully, it will be solved soon.
Okay. Maybe one last question from me. Is there any specific focus in terms of utilizing the opportunities of cross-border e-commerce? I know Ethiopian Airlines, Ethiopost, Labor, and Safaricom have been working on some things around that. But is there any particular focus from the ministry on this?
Actually, we are working on cross-border trade, on cross-border e-commerce with the framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. We have been closely following the implementation of the ratification of the Digital Trade Protocol, which is also part of the Africa Free Continental Trade Agreement. Actually, we have seen the document. We have also discussed with the private sector about this protocol, which is actually encouraging cross-border trade. Fortunately, since Ethiopia has started the digital transformation program earlier, we have the e-transaction proclamation, and also recently that in the near future the personal data protection will be approved, and these are in the digital trade protocol of the African Union. These are a prerequisites for cross-border trade. So cross-border trade is definitely is one of the concern area from the ministry side. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Abiot. Back to you, Nigam.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, Dr. Abiot. We really appreciate you joining us, given that you're having to juggle a number of meetings. So thank you. I think this is a great time to bring in Izana because, you know, we've touched upon this sort of social media channels versus other channels to be selling online. And Izana, you really support MSMEs in getting online and making that visible presence to trade. So over to you on talking about Africa 118's work more broadly, and specifically how you support MSMEs. Yes, trade online.
Thanks, Nigam. It's great to be here. So at Africa 118, our mission is to be the CMO, the Chief Marketing Officer of SMEs. As you mentioned, we operate in Ethiopia and 5 other countries. So Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and Ghana on the West African side. There's 3 pillars to our business. The first part is market intelligence. So over the years, we've built a database of about 8 billion businesses across the continent. So one of the things that we do is we work with e-commerce players to help them onboard MSMEs onto their platform. The second thing that we do is we provide digital presence solutions for MSMEs. So we've worked with, for example, Google, where we've helped about 1 million businesses get online onto Google Maps, build a Google business profile so they can be found by the clients. So one of the things that Tagabu was talking about is location. So pinning businesses so people can come and get services from them. We have about 5,000 businesses that we work with in terms of digital, so websites, digital marketing, e-commerce as well. So helping them along the journey. The other part that we do as part of helping these businesses get online is digital skills training. So I think Munir talked about it, I think Dr. Abiot as well. So we've trained about 30,000 businesses around how do I get online? How do I, if I have a Telegram group, why do I need a website? Or why do I need to be, so those kinds of questions that every business has. Realizing that most of these are not standalone, they can be complementary as opposed to choosing one versus the other. So that's the second pillar of our business, helping businesses get online. The third part is digital marketplace. So we launched with the support of GSMA TaskMobi, which is a digital marketplace for services in the home services space. So plumbing, electrical cleaning services. We have about 3,800 service providers that we connect with users. Over the years, we've pivoted primarily to the B2B space, mostly helping companies looking for service providers in plumbing, cleaning, and electrical services. And that business has grown nicely for us. We work with the GSMA on 2 projects, so I guess this is why this is quite relevant. A lot of the findings from the e-commerce survey that you did is what we see as well in terms of the challenges of bringing businesses online, helping them trade. So about 2 years ago, we launched a digital presence pack for MSMEs, where we work with essentially a very light touch solution to help you get presence on Google, connect to your Facebook profile, and then manage that through a dashboard as well as a TaskMobi launch.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. Can I ask? So you're in 5 markets now. Can I ask for potentially a comparison? Like, what can we? Is the experience in Ethiopia with delivering these services any more unique or different than other markets? And do you tailor it accordingly, or do you find that across the markets the challenges MSMEs face in going online are fairly similar?
The opportunity is the same. The challenges are higher in Ethiopia. So we did another project where we supported about 3,000 businesses with a digital launchpad project. Of the 3,000 businesses, about 600 were in Ethiopia. And then what we found is that they're starting from, when you compare to Kenya, as an example, we're starting from a lower point in terms of, first of all, awareness, understanding how do these channels work. So I think as the other panelists talked about, Telegram is very popular. But in terms of awareness of how do these different channels work together, how can I actually, so if I have a Telegram group, of course, my products are in a stack, but having one place where I can see the different products and services that I offer in a static fashion so that clients can find them, optimizing for search, those kinds of things. We start a little bit further back in Ethiopia, but what we found is that in terms of the impact is quite comparable. So when you do bring a business online, I think your stats, Nigam, were quite compelling, around 98%. What we found is about 58% of the businesses that we supported, this includes the ones in Ethiopia, about similar, saw growth in their business. We saw that they hired more people. We saw like about 23% incremental growth from the fact that they were online. Now, some of that growth actually happens offline, but still, when you compare them versus non-digital businesses, there is a significant impact in terms of their growth. So even though we're starting further back in terms of digital presence, a number of businesses that can be found online. When they are online, we found that the impact is quite similar to what we've seen in the other markets. So you start in different places in terms of the kinds of skills required. There are some limitations. Clearly, one of them is around awareness generation. So I think, as Dr. Abiot mentioned, if you want to drive traffic, unfortunately, most of the traffic drivers are dollar-based. So if you want to run ads on Facebook or Instagram, whatever that you require dollar, which we don't have, or we have very scarce supply of those in Ethiopia. So a Kenyan company has an advantage in that context. So there are some challenges that are unique to us. But the good news is that the appetite for going onboarding onto e-commerce platforms and the impact when they do is actually very comparable to what we saw in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania. So certainly solving some of these barriers, the market is sizable and the impact is there. So I think we have, once these barriers are solved, the good news is that the impact is certainly there in terms of the actual business results that the businesses get.
Thank you so much. I'm going to bring you in for one more, and I'm keen to pass over to Abel. We haven't discussed payments with Munir, which we certainly would like to, and also to kind of go back to Tegabu on some of the overcoming of the delivery challenges, which I think are really a big problem in this whole sort of ecosystem development. So a last one for you, Izana, for now, which is across all markets and then also in Ethiopia, do you look for a certain level of readiness in an MSME or a certain size? Is there a certain business profile that you think is more or less ready to be online and trading, or there isn't? Is it a particularly urban business, for example, or employing a number?
Very. So that's one of the things that we've learned over time. So you do need to segment businesses. So there's a couple of things. One of them is their motivation to grow. That's actually one of the things that so if a business is not motivated to grow, so I have a small business, a corner, and that just feeds my family, there's no benefit in trying to bring them faster than they are. You have to go to where they are. So one is their motivation. Second is category. So there's some businesses that are very sensitive to digital. So if you're in the export business, you realize your clients are there. If you're in tour and travel, if you're, I think some of the ones you mentioned in terms of beauty. So certainly your category is a driver in terms of your in terms of your propensity to get benefit. And then the third one is in terms of how you approach them. So from the GSMA work, we saw that they segmented about 30 or 70% of businesses were very passive, which is, I want to focus on what I do. I don't want to focus on understanding, the stuff that Gabu does, logistics and all that. I just want to be, I have great flowers. I just want to sell my flowers. I don't want to be. There's 30% that want to be active. They want to actually measure the inventory and all that. So I think segmenting them along are they active or passive, I think is very important as well. So for the 70%, all the work should be done for them. They're willing to pay for it, but they don't want to actually go through that exercise. So you're right, Tigab. It wasn't necessarily by size of business, but it was mostly category. And I don't think we'll have time to get into it, but we did find that gender helped. So we found that women-led businesses actually had a higher propensity to engage and get training and work than the others. But I think that's for another session.
Great, thank you so much. Those are some really interesting insights. I will handing back over to you on
Yeah,
to.
thank you, Nigam. I think the part of the discussion that we touched so far is payments in particular. So maybe I'll bring this to Munir. We have also seen in the study as well as in the findings that people prefer, cash. I mean, e-commerce business prefer cash on delivery, and actually, until recently, people used to also say payment is a major challenge in e-commerce. So now that we have the Telebers, the M-Pesas, and also bank-enabled wallets, has there been any challenge, and how is the uptake like, Munir, from your experience? Maybe you can also add what Kafiya does in this aspect as well.
So if you look at payment is absolutely a challenge, but what's the advantage of cash on delivery? I think we cannot disassociate the advantages of cash on delivery, especially on social media, versus payment on an e-commerce platform. So e-commerce requires, as a prerequisite, prefers electronic payment because it's institutional. It cannot depend on a web of people that bring the cash back into the business. So that has been solved. But what has not been solved for the adoption to take off is this relationship between, again, I wish Dr. was here, taxation, convenience, and e-commerce utility of social media. So that's the biggest challenge. So when you come to payments, so the second thing is again adoption. So the payment is the consumer side. So I think both Tagawa and Lizana touched upon it, and Dr. elaborated on it. A lot of work needs to be done to move payments beyond transfers. So if you look at what Telebir has now broken into is really transfer payments, not merchant payments. If you look at, as a country, I think we have less than 1% merchant payments on digital rails. So awareness of the use of payments for merchant services. But that can only be possible if the underlying challenge is solved to have the exchange of goods and services online without the need of cash on delivery. It's convenience, both on each side. In terms of, I think, what the country has now, we have pivoted away from payments significantly. We are significantly moving towards embedded finance-led B2B and B2C, digitizing the smallholder farmers on a rural payment perspective, and focusing on lending based on our credit scoring. Because what we have seen is that merchant payment is such a very challenging business, and with the advent of two major telecoms, the wallet game is now, for me, over. It's either going to be heavily dominated by Ethio Telecom, like what we see in M-Pesa in Kenya, or there'll be a small share M-Pesa takes. So we are trying to move to more value-added services beyond payments. Payments is more and more becoming infrastructure for us.
Thank you, Muni, for an excellent summary. Maybe, Tagabu, if I could give you one chance before we move over to the Q&A session. Earlier, when we were interrupted, you were talking about logistics challenges, particularly the shortage of vehicles and motorbikes and such. Maybe if you could summarize this for us in terms of what Asia Express is doing in terms of solving this, and then we'll move on to the Q&A session.
Thank you, Abel. Definitely, scarcity and challenge breeds innovation. So we understood that we can't scale our business with with the current supply of motorbikes. So what we did is we mapped out the town and we introduced consolidation. So we focused on same day and next day delivery services only, and we avoided express services. And with same day, next day delivery services give us a chance to do consolidation and route optimization. And with that, we introduced the model called warehouse on wheels. So we send our motorbike and our cars into the dense areas, and people will wait there. and will receive the package, and they will walk around and deliver with a limited kilometer radius. With that, we managed to deliver on time, and our growth is not limited by the challenge that we have right now. Interestingly, Amazon has been testing this also last year. We have been doing this for the last 3 years. And Amazon has been testing this last year in London. It's not because of supply of motorbikes in case of Amazon, but it's in dense cities, it takes a lot of time for vans to deliver. So what they did is they will send the van into center of London, then there will be workers collecting from the van, and they deliver door to door. And a single van managed to deliver like hundreds of them that day. And if not, it was a challenge. So I think it's interesting enough even to be picked by Global Faith, but it's more fitting for Ethiopian economy. And in the long term, we're looking at two ways of fixing the problem. One is, and by 2024, since the government is not allowing motorbikes, but the government allows electric bikes. So we plan to introduce electric bicycles in 2-3 months. Those who are delivering by walking can now have electric bikes and deliver throughout the town. And secondly, we are in the process of developing pick-up and drop-off points. So the van will just drop it to the pickup and drop-off points, and people can pick it up from their closest locations. This not only solves the supply challenge, but this solves the addressing challenge as well. Because last mile is very expensive because of addressing and high communication costs between the customer and the driver. But if we can drop that, in 1 kilometer radius of wherever they live or work, they can just pick it up wherever they are going to home from work or from any leisure time. So we're looking into a short-term and long-term solution. We are deploying these mechanisms, and it has been working so far with us.
Thank you, Izana, and then actually everyone for excellent points. Maybe if you could quickly go to the Q&A, Niga, maybe you could take us
Yes.
out, please.
Yes, thank you so much. We are about 8 minutes over time, but I'm hoping everyone can stay an extra 5 minutes so we can get through some questions. And for any remaining, we will try and get back to you on email. Please feel free to email them to us. We will ask them to the right panelists and get back to you. So this first one is from Mishingo Jack for Izana. And it is, given the popularity of informal e-commerce channels, are there any best practices on successful integration of e-invoicing systems for taxation purposes that other countries could learn from? Based on those successes, how are governments balancing regulatory requirements with growing e-commerce? It's an interesting one. I think it's, yeah. Over to you, Izana.
Maybe I should let Munir answer that, since it's an invoicing question. I know that in Kenya, sort of Lipa na M-Pesa, which is merchant payment, is something that's quite popular. But maybe Munir, I think you're well positioned to answer that. We do see that in other countries, there is merchant payment as opposed to just transfer from peer to peer, which is good from an accounting standpoint as a business. It does open up sort of the issue of taxation. But maybe Munir, you have a more informed point of view on that side.
Thank you, Zana. Ethiopia just allowed electronic receipts very, very recently. So now e-commerce companies can actually issue an invoice based on electronic receipt. But that actually exposes the transaction more again for, as Zana was saying, for taxation. So again, I go back to the de facto rule to say we need to solve that part. But what is interesting is now in the previous methodology, what used to happen for e-commerce companies is that on delivery, we used to dispatch actual printed invoice. So if you don't do that, then you'll be falling into a legal trap of invoicing. So I think it has been 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Now electronic receipts are allowed by the Ministry of Revenue.
Thank you, Munir. We have another one for Izana, which is on digital skills. It's coming out strongly as a key e-commerce enabler. Izana, wanted to hear your thoughts on how to scale up learning and skills to create more awareness about e-commerce in Ethiopia.
Yeah, so that one is a tricky one in the sense that we do a lot of skills training, as I mentioned. During COVID and all that, the shortcut was to do basically online digital skills training. That's the scaling thing. You just offer it online. We've had zero, very limited success with training MSMEs online for digital skills because by definition, they're not by definition, but oftentimes accessing training that way, which would be the obvious scaling mechanism, hasn't been particularly successful. So what we found has worked is working through associations. So the Chamber of Commerce, women's business associations, exporters. So by bringing businesses together with like needs, and then having a training session that is customized, for example, the fashion people in the leather sector. So bringing them together and then having customized training for what does it mean to be digital for them? What is the e-commerce layer? Some of the issues that come up and having the businesses train each other. That's the part that we found has been more impactful. So there is a limitation in the sense that that most of this is physical, and then after that they can go do the virtual side. But what we found is that the investment around having businesses come together and learn in typically using the infrastructure that the business associations have already put together is what we found has been the most effective way to not just scale in terms of reaching many businesses or MSMEs, but at least having the skills actually connect because they learn from other MSMEs around what their experience has been. So that's what we found has been the most useful combination to reach more businesses.
Thank you so much. So peer-to-peer learning and mentorship. Thank you. Henok Sayer has asked a question. I think this one actually goes to GSMA. Collaboration among institutions needs to give prior attention in order to be viable from all around resources, achievement of financial inclusion agenda in the company, insurance, fintechs, microfinance, banks, Ministry of Innovation, and other government organs should work together to harvest the benefits, including with other stakeholders. Does the study address somehow these important economy players' role, please? So we do in the report actually offer recommendations to groups of stakeholders. So the government is one, and then we talk about e-commerce marketplaces, MSMEs, technology providers, and communications infrastructure providers. So you can look at the report and you'll find those sets of recommendations. I feel that Dr. Abiyo might have been best placed to answer how different government agencies are collaborating to advance e-commerce. Unfortunately, he is not with us, but we can definitely try and get that answer for you. Okay. Sorry, just chasing to see if there's any more.
So, Nigam, there is another question for you from Mashingo Jack. He says, of the MSME survey, what percentage were formal and what percentage were informal? And is there any correlation between the type of business, formal, informal, and the preferred e-commerce channel?
So no. So that's a really good question. It's actually in the report. One of my colleagues maybe can quickly pull up the report and see how many in Ethiopia were informal. Overall, I would say about 80%, well, it varied by market, somewhere between 50 and 80 in each market were informal. But we have that stat for Ethiopia. So if you just pull up the report, you're able to see, I'm guessing at 70, but that's very off the top of my head, would be informal. The second part of the question is, was there a correlation between an MSME being informal and?
Being formal, informal, and their preferred e-commerce channel.
No, so we didn't see a relationship between formality, informality, and business sector. So we didn't find that in the survey, which is quite interesting. What I do think we did find for a number of markets was if you were informal, you were more likely to want cash on delivery and not be using electronic channels. But that also did vary by market. But there was definitely a correlation between informality and preference for cash payments. which I suppose is not surprising. Abel, any others?
One other question from Henok Suyu. Says, given the digital financial and financial inclusion expansion, how are our agrarian people taking advantage via financial inclusion journey? He's referring to specifically the example of agricultural inputs. I know, Munir, you have some experience in this area. Maybe would you like to take this?
So within the Ethiopian context, I mean, we have interesting experiences. On one of our platforms, close to 225,000 smallholder farmers access input supply, leveraging an input credit product. But the main challenge for the farmer is not only the improved supply, but the credit component of input. So any successful e-commerce around agriculture or agricultural technology, agtechs, is really, can we come up with a way and means of providing them input credit that would then allow them to buy and access input supply. So we have a very good example in Ethiopia where e-commerce from a merchant perspective functions very well, but it is led by input credit. So about 225,000 farmers access credit on the platform and then access improved inputs from a set of merchants or a set of agro dealers in the neighborhoods and the areas they reside in.
Great, got it. Thank you so much. I think we're over time and can call it a wrap. I do have an answer to the question on how many were informal versus formal. And actually, I'm so sorry, I remembered it wrong. So just pulling that up, 60% answered yes to if they were officially registered, and 20% said no in Ethiopia. So actually, no, this is a heavily formal. So my apologies for remembering that wrong. And at the end of this, I just do want to say a huge thank you to FSD Ethiopia for partnering with us, to Munir, to Izana, to Tegabu for making the time to join us and share their insights. I think in the discussion, you will have seen how sort of broad the e-commerce landscape is and how many elements need to kind of work together to scale e-commerce. So while I think the evidence is very much there that's come out in the discussion, as well as our findings, which is there are benefits to this, whether you're using social e-commerce or other avenues. More often than not, MSMEs are benefiting from being online and trading online, but that there are many parts that need to work well together, from payments, from the quality of products and being able to seamlessly order, to getting your delivery on time, and so it's a complex landscape. I think I'd just end on that note again with a huge thank you to everyone who joined us. Abel, are there any final words from you?
Just want to thank everyone for joining us. Please read the report, and you'll find much more insight in the report than we have been able to discuss here. With this, I'd like to conclude, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.